Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome. Or as Sarah likes to say, aloha and welcome. And we encourage you to send your greetings in the chat and tell us where you're from. My name is Deborah Harrington. I am the Executive Director for 3CSN, and I'm happy to see so many of you on a Friday morning. And before I start talking too much, we want to get right to don't start with the hello from Glendale Community Colleges. I'll just tell you in just a minute what I think about that. No, I'm just kidding. It's really great to be here with our 3CSN crew, and you're going to meet them all today, our fantastic coordinators who have been doing so much to stay connected with you over the last 2.5 years. We have reached a bigger audience than ever before. And so our network's expanding and we really appreciate that. I am going to turn it over to our network director, charge of all things great and wonderful at 3CSN day to day. And she's going to talk about our community agreements. And this is Dr. Jessica Christo. Please welcome her.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you to see so many familiar faces, and some of you, and we really appreciate it, took a chance to fill out our form, and our form was about introductions and community agreements. We start all our professional learning with some community agreements, setting some norms like we would want to do in our classrooms and in our meetings with our colleagues. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to share with you what some of your colleagues here have said, and there's over 100 people coming in, so that is awesome. And we will share these links with you, but in an email that was sent out a couple of days ago, we asked for you to introduce yourself and to let us know how do you center care and hope in your learning communities. And we got some awesome answers, and I didn't even get a chance to highlight all of them, but some of them were like, by removing barriers and engaging in active listening. I really appreciated this one. I asked students if they want my advice or just to listen. We also asked you, what's a norm that you bring to the table here with you today? Someone had mentioned just being committed to listening, active listening, and keeping an open mind. My agreement is to communicate more. Let me just click on that one. So that means that I care for everyone. So these are ways in which we show our care. And then we actually had another question about anything that you'd like us to know. A lot of people let me know they have to leave early. They have childcare issues, which is great. I mean, in these times, care has to do also with equity and flexibility. And I think that was awesome to have that question in there. So in the chat, we are going to be putting a couple of things for you. We are going to be putting this form, but also a participant guide. So let me just tell you about the participant guide real quick. So this participant guide is what you're going to be using to follow along with us during links. This participant guide has a lot of hyperlinks and resources for you and is yours to take away. We are going to be referring to this participant guide throughout the session. So if you ever feel lost, you're not sure where we are, just refer to your guide. That will be going into the chat right now, as well as the form. In case you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, you'd like to ask these, answer these questions, you'll have them there in the participant guide. So I am going to return it back to Dr. Deborah Harrington, who's going to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning. Thank you.
Well, welcome to those of you who have never been to a Links event before, but also welcome to those of you who have. This is, believe it or not, we're going into our 14th year of 3CSN, and we're really proud of that fact. And maybe what you don't know about Links is Links has always been a space where we try to really talk about what we see as the most emergent issues or ideas that are happening with particularly supporting our students. And so Links was the first place where we launched our California Acceleration Project Community of Practice, Reading Apprenticeship Community of Practice, Habits of Mind Community of Practice. And today we are going to focus on this whole really, I think, vital issue of care that has surfaced. It's always been true. If you look over the decades, the engagement survey that comes out of the University of Austin has always said, it's consistent, that what matters the most for students is feeling connected to at least one person, feeling that one person at the campus, it doesn't matter what role they play, cares about them. And so we're really pleased this morning to have a keynote speaker who I think embodies leadership for care not just of students, but for faculty and staff and administrators. He is my boss in the Los Angeles Community College District. I think what's important about 3CSN is to remember that all of us still have a foot in our institutions. We're not just coordinators that are coming to you from out of the blue. We work in California community colleges. In my case, I've worked in California community colleges for 37 years. And I have to say, I've had a lot of bosses come and go. But Dr. Ryan Corner has really been, he's just never going to let me live this down. He really has been my favorite boss. And the reason why is because he does exhibit care first, and respect. And both of those things, care and respect, what they do is they help build trust. And I'll never forget, I was working at a different college many years ago, and somebody said, with trust, somebody can lead you anywhere and you will go with them. And I think that that's really, really important. And I just want to say on a very personal level, Ryan's going to be leaving us in the LA Community College District, and he's going to be the new president superintendent of Glendale Community College. And you can read more about his bio in the links stuff. But those who are here from Glendale Community College, how lucky you are. And I want to say that I was a reference for Ryan, and with my whole heart, I told them that the number one thing that he exhibits is empathy and care. And for that, it has made a tremendous difference in the lives of our students and also in the life of 3CSN, because he has supported us through thick and thin. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Ryan Corner.
So good morning, all. Deborah's making it hard to get started here. I still have a month left at LA, so I can't get too choked up yet. More to come on that. But I just wanted to thank everybody for being here and for allowing me to speak with you all. Deborah and her team at 3CSN always have a way of providing people with an opportunity to think about the big issues that sometimes get pushed out of the way when we have to deal with operations. And I'm very grateful for having the time to put together some thoughts to share with you and all the work that you're doing in creating caring campuses, and to think about the ethic of care that you all are trying to create with your students. Because I do think that your efforts are going to be what brings our students success in the future. Now more than ever, it's completely clear that students need more than just what we provide in the classroom. And seeing some of the comments that Jessica shared from the responses from you as a team really show that we're right on track with where we need to be. So to begin, I'll just say, for me, reaching a culture of care starts with a discussion about empathy and really being able to have a genuine effort to understand individuals and to recognize where they're at in their own situations and what we can do to help them in terms of moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about a culture of care. I saw this in some of the responses as well and in the readings, but when we think about a culture of care, and for us, this student group on our right is one of our groups that we sent internationally. So we always want to be focused on students and the different needs that we can fulfill in very innovative ways. But it really starts with, what does it mean to care for students? To me, what care means is seeing students for who they are, not just as a student, but as an individual, what they bring in the totality of who they are, through their family, through their upbringing, through the different experiences that they bring assets to the campus and to the learning environment in our classrooms. Care means promoting understanding of this individual context. Just recognizing that with each of these individual aspects. We have to really seek understanding and how that relates to what students are going through in the educational setting, and how their different ecosystems and lives outside of the college really have an impact on what they're doing and how successful they can be. Care means recognizing individual needs. And ultimately, this is how we get to a practice of equity. To me, looking at a culture of care is the building block for equity, because it means that we're really aligning our responses, our systems, our passions with exactly what students need at an individual and a collective level. This really requires far more than a programmatic response, which is what we tend to do in education, is we see a problem and we try to create a program. It requires a culture shift to supporting students like we would our own family. So let's talk about families for 1 second, and I'm going to start with mine. I have a younger brother. He's in his 30s, who has attempted college many times, and he has struggled every single time that he has attempted it. My brother is bipolar, and he struggles. He can't get through a 16-week class. There's no way for him to get through 4 months of instruction without having mental health interfere in his learning process. He's been more successful in short-term classes, but time and time again, this non-academic challenge interferes with what I know could be his success in education. And that's his story. That's where he's at in education. But what is mental health for him is childcare for others. It's the single parents who are looking for ways to continue their education, but have things that get in the way. It's the changing work schedule for some of our students, where they may have employers that don't care that they've committed to a college education, and they need them to change around in the best interest of the business. It's the economic challenges, it's the health challenges, it's the family obligations. And we'll see in a moment that these are very real things that our students bring up. And yet they're the very things that we don't talk a lot about when we think about solutions for student success. We often like to reflect on what we can do insular to our campuses, because these other external issues, those are somebody else's responsibilities. So we really need to find a way to respond to students. We have to recognize that their needs are outside of our colleges as well. And sometimes this culture of care requires students to really be listened to, so that we can understand and reflect on what their needs are and make a strong commitment to moving forward. So how does this relate to the context of higher education right now? It's very easy to focus on an individual student, my brother Jonathan, and say, hey, that's a student we could help. But how does that relate to what we see overall in higher education? We've seen a dramatic shift in enrollment. I mean, just since the pandemic, the California community colleges have lost over 300,000 students. And I want us all just to pause right there and think about that in terms of the impact on our communities, our economy, the individual family lives. 300,000 students that won't be pursuing higher education. Less AA and baccalaureate degrees in the future for the workforce we need. Less healthcare professionals for the next pandemic that we face, or for the continued endemic that we're facing right now. And what we see is that there has really been a shift in the value proposition for higher education. No longer is it assumed that one needs to go through higher education in order to be successful. There's many competing philosophies out there, and we're seeing it with our students. We are not able to justify that we are the best benefit to our students anymore. And to that, I really believe that a caring culture can combat it. And we've seen that in evidence in colleges across the country that have adopted a more student-focused, caring culture, whose enrollments have not suffered at all during the pandemic. We need to connect with students. When we did a survey of our students and asked them why they chose the institution they did, nearly 2/3 said that it was because they felt connected, and that this impacted their decision to enroll. Almost 72% said it was because there was a welcoming environment. I mean, think about that for a second. How much time do we spend on those issues in our institutions versus others? Think about your governance committee meetings, think about your department meetings. How often do you ask yourself, do our students feel welcomed on campus? 72% of students say that's one of their decisions to enroll in college, is how they feel. I know that's how I felt when I made my decision as far as higher education, is which college did I feel most welcomed at? Ask yourself this, do you feel welcomed on your campus? Do you as an employee feel validated as a faculty member, as a classified staff, as an administrator? If we don't feel welcomed on our own campuses, how do we exhibit that to our students? Probably the most important question to ask, though, is who doesn't feel welcomed on our campus? And I think you'll see that in your enrollment trends. And if we switch the conversation from one of why did we lose so many students? Why did we lose 300,000 students? And reflect on that instead with a question of why do 300,000 students feel unwelcomed in our campuses? That's a very different conversation. It's one that will really make us reflect on what we create in terms of a culture of care. So why do students leave? Recently in Los Angeles, we did a survey of students that had either applied but never attended, or who had left the institution before completing their degree. 46% said they just needed a break. It's too overwhelming. 39% said they were too busy. 32%, nearly a third of our students were saying that they left because they had family obligations. You know, let's listen to the actual words of students. These are quotes that students took the time to write into their survey. I'm planning to go back. Unfortunately, due to my work schedule and responsibilities, I can't take more classes. Mental state after the pandemic was drained, and I honestly need a break. I do plan to go back once my situation improves. I used up all of my savings and resources to help my family, which was impacted by COVID-19. I need a year working 2 jobs full-time, 2 jobs full-time to get where I want to be financially to come back to school. These are the challenges that our students face. And they're not academic challenges. And so we have to ask ourselves, what do we have in way of solutions? How do we work with students? And some of the comments that you all put in your responses to today, sometimes it may be just as clear as listening to students and saying, I understand this is how you feel. I mean, let's take a moment. How many people on the call right now fit into that 46% that feel like you just need a break? This is truly something that we need to work on. Let's look at what they list as educational barriers. When we ask students what their top educational barriers are, here are a few of them. Financial, not a surprise, 50% of our students say that they face financial barriers. Increased worry or anxiety. 46% of our students are saying that this is a big challenge for them in terms of academics. Increased anxiety. 32% lack of motivation, 22% health issues, another 18% childcare. You know, think about 18% of your student population, and then think about how many spots you have open in your child development center. Think about the hours you have it open and how that relates to when we offer classes. Recently, we were listening to a group of CalWorks students at an event I was at with Glendale, and they had a simple request. Can we align our spring breaks with the unifieds? Because we don't have childcare to go to school when we have a spring break that's different for our children than it is with us in college. Wow. Simple request, but one that takes a whole week out of their educational experience. We saw this grow even with the pandemic. We saw with our worry and stress increasing. 62% of students during the pandemic saying they had average to extreme stress. 72% saying that this increased in worry and anxiety presented a challenge to them. 72% of students, listen to the words again, increased worry, anxiety, and depression, which is affecting my progress this semester. I need assistance and extra time provided to complete my assignments. It has really been a struggle to just push through and be motivated to complete the semester, especially with the uncertainty of the pandemic. These are the things that our students face, and one that a culture of care could really start to address. So how do we get there? How do we get to a culture of care? How do we cultivate it? How do we make sure that we can provide these types of resources to our students? I think first and foremost, we need to focus on building relationships with students. It was mentioned in Deborah's introduction that students often say that that one person that they felt like cared about them was the reason they stayed in school. If all of us are working towards that, that becomes a very, very productive way of increasing student success and equity in our institutions. But to do that, we really have to confront the challenge of this is not my job. My job is to process financial aid, not to listen to a student's concerns. It's all of our jobs to listen to students' concerns. This is something that we really have to focus on in terms of our redesign of cultures. And I'll give a small example. One of our faculty members here in LA, we had a discussion about grading during the pandemic. And she said she did not lower the integrity of her grading. She made sure that all of the components were exactly the same. But what she did do was made sure students had more flexibility in getting the time in, getting the assignments where it was more convenient to them. Why is a set deadline one in which determines whether students' learning outcomes have been met? This was her question. And she found that her grades actually improved during the pandemic because she was providing a more sensitive environment as it related to turning in assignments for her students. This was the very real conversation she had with herself in terms of understanding that part of her job was being understanding of where students were at and not just performing content delivery. I really think that the way that we move forward is with modeling care in how we treat each other. How can we begin to express to students that we care about them if they don't see us caring about each other? If they don't see us treating each other with the respect that really speaks to our understanding of where we're at. So we need to really move forward and have this conversation of how do we model care in our institutions, not just with students, but in our leadership. We need to model care. We need to show students what it looks like in practice, not just with them, but with each other, with our colleagues, with an understanding that for every single thing I just listed for students, employees are going through that same challenge. They're going through family obligations, healthcare obligations, financial obligations. And what do we do to make sure that we have an understanding that those challenges are real? We need to respect those around us and really seek out what are the unique passions. I think about this in terms of the personal why. We now have 153 people on this call. Every single one of you is here for a particular reason. You have a story. You have a deep-seated reason why you're in education, why you spend your life helping students. And I think far too often we forget to ask each other why we got into education in the first place. And I think understanding that helps us to understand each other, why we're here, what our individual challenges are, and how we can really lean on each other's assets, each other's stories to push forward in terms of our support for students. Because when you have trust in their leadership, all employees, that's where you can truly have a shared vision. Is in an understanding that leadership is a shared function, and that the more we understand about each other, the more we'll really understand why people make certain decisions, and we'll have trust and faith in those decisions. I think now more than ever, we're facing a huge amount of ambiguity in higher education. We look at higher education and there's so many questions that we don't have a firm answer to. How do we bring students back to our campuses? What does the future of higher education look like in our balance between remote and in-person offerings? These are questions. And if anyone says, I know exactly what the answer is, they're wrong. We don't know what the answer is. There's going to be a lot of trial and error, and there's going to be this extreme need to innovate and to respond to students' needs. But the only way that we can truly have innovation is with an understanding that our traditional model has not been working. We need to reinvent our model for the students. And to do that, we have to have empathy and compassion for each other. As we build this understanding, we begin to trust each other and we allow each other to try new things. And I will tell you, not everything we try is going to be successful. There are going to be many things that we try that we say, well, that didn't work. But that's okay, because we know that each of us is trying with an authentic interest in making sure that students are served well. That's this mutual respect that allows us to innovate and to lead. And I truly believe that if we build this culture of care with each other, we will find more successful solutions to the problems that face higher education. So I'm going to end with this, the importance of gratitude. We need to thank our students for our commitment, for their commitment to us. Think about all those challenges that students listed, and they're still here. They're still here. They're still trying. They're still successful. I mean, how often do we sit down and say, thank you? Thank you for trying so hard. Thank you for pushing through all these challenges and barriers that you see in your lives, but you still find value and the importance of higher education to come to us and to let us educate you. I mean, that's really, truly something we need to spend more time on, especially now when we have all of our graduations going on, to reflect on what it took for those students to be successful and to thank them for the effort that they put in. I think we need to thank each other, the faculty, staff, and administrators who put in the work to try to make students successful, who go beyond what is usually expected. This picture on the right, this is my team. I think you can see some familiar faces there. And I know that my success is because I've let them lead. And we have to say thank you for that. So, you know, I'll just end by saying that when we look back on our work with each other, I think the one thing that we should ask ourselves is, did I learn more than I taught? Because if we truly respect each other and we understand that we each have expertise, I think the answer should always be yes. That in each of our situations as leaders, we should have come to an understanding that we learned more than we taught. And I can definitely tell you that from this team and from the team with 3CSN, I have definitely learned more than I have taught. And so I hope you find some value in the words that I've shared and seek to go back to your campuses and really express the gratitude and make sure that we begin to model this culture of care that can support our students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Corner. Yay! Virtual rounds of applauses. Thank you so much for being with us. We do have questions coming in through the chat, and we have a lot of great comments and a lot of great discussions that are going back and forth. I'm going to hand it to Roy. Roy, do you have some questions for Dr. Corner?
Yes, thank you for putting the questions in the chat. And if something comes up during the Q&A, please continue to do so. And so I'm going to start off with Jessica, who asked, going back to the topic about students feeling welcomed. And her question was, on the survey, did the question on the student survey state feeling welcomed in a physical campus or an online campus environment? She says a lot of students are still taking online classes and do not experience the physical campus.
You know what, that's a really good question. It did not have that distinction, but it probably should in the future, because I can tell you that looking through our digital presence, we have some work to do. I would really encourage anyone who has not already done so to try to go through the process of enrolling as a student, to look for information on your websites and ask, is this a welcoming web presence for students? Or did we kind of create websites for ourselves? I think that's a really important question. The survey did not get at it, but it should in the future.
We have a question, and actually there's a few questions and comments that were related to DSPS students. And one from Lori asks, how do you suggest referring a student with mental illness to the DSPS office?
You know, I referred my brother there because I knew that he would need more time on tests. I think that's part of the overall culture of care, is destigmatizing the differences that each of us have and celebrating in them. But it is still a challenge right now. There's a lot of folks that just the term DSPS, with the disability leading that, has been something that puts students off from attending. I know that some institutions have even transitioned to more of a description of the office as an office of special support or things like that. But I do think working towards destigmatizing and focusing on the way that students can actually benefit from additional support. And I think that goes beyond DSPS. It goes for tutoring as well. It goes for our learning support centers. We need to work very hard to make sure that students know what's available to them and what benefits it can bring.
Yeah, our campus just changed theirs to accommodation services to remove the D from that. So yeah, great point. We have another question from Bijou in reference to the need for families, right? The space for families to be involved in the educational journey. And he says, it appears you're advocating for families to be a part of students' educational journey. In that case, how can the California community colleges formally incorporate family input into the collegial governance structures?
Well, there are some colleges that do it very well, beyond my expertise, to be sure. But that's essentially what they do, is they make sure there's an opportunity for families to be involved on campus. I can tell you that where I began to value higher education was seeing my mom go through CSUN when I was young. It's a great deal of meaning when you see your parent trying and struggling and still seeing it worth it, staying up late. I can still, a little older than the new computers now, but I can still hear the hum of the IBM electric typewriter when I think about it, as she was working on those late night papers. I would say that there are probably colleges across the state that could give advice on this, but the one that I know the best is LA Valley College. They have a family resource center, and they've given a lot of presentations on this, that this is not a child development center. This is a resource center for families, and the way that they integrate it. And they've done things like developed areas of the library where families can study with the children incorporated into that study environment. And I think breaking down those silos is one way to approach it. And I would really encourage people to look towards the innovation of their colleagues that have been successful.
A bit of follow-up with Bijou's other part of the question is, and this is something I know faculty struggle with, we want to help students, but we also recognize that we have FERPA regulations. And so, how do we navigate FERPA when we're trying to really step in and support our students as much as we can?
Carefully. Guess that's off the cuff comment, but and look, Rebecca's already put in the Family Resource Center there for LA Valley College. Thank you, Rebecca. Managing FERPA is definitely a challenge, but I think that there are many opportunities outside of those constraints that we can work on to build understanding of families and that unique experience. I think one of the ways that we can do it is with this culture shift and an understanding that, you have a student who's a student parent, and then you think of their children. But those children more than likely are going to end up being your students as well. And we're just getting to them a little bit earlier. We're providing them with the resources and making sure that there's this understanding of a welcoming environment so that they're already primed to know that we are the ones who are going to be able to help them be successful in this world.
And I have a question from Luis, and it's a short question, but I think it's a really powerful question that I think we're all asking ourselves. How can care be sustained?
I think that goes back to the discussion of the difference between a culture shift and a programmatic solution. If you're asking the question of how do we have the level of resources we need in order to provide all the care we want to students, that will never happen. We're not funded to the level where we can definitely provide all we can for students. But I think when we talk about a culture of care, it's more about our relationship with students individually and collectively, and with making sure that there's a culture on our institution that respects students for who they are beyond their student capacity and seeks to listen to them, understand them, and respond the best we can with needs. I will say that in every interaction I've had with students where they've run into an issue, they're not looking for perfection from our institutions. They're looking for understanding. And if students feel that they're understood and that we're working towards the best solution, I think that is sustainable. But it requires a common understanding and a commitment across the entire institution that we really need to work together so that students feel valued and that their participation in our systems is something that we're working to make sure is productive for them.
We have a question from Steve, and this is related to one of our largest constituencies on the instructional side and adjunct faculty. But Steve wonders, how can we model care? How can that model of care be applied to our adjunct who he doesn't feel truly embraced and cared about, perhaps in the same way as oftentimes our full-time faculty?
I think first by just understanding that sentiment is real. I think sometimes we try to be defensive when adjuncts say that they don't feel involved or empowered on campus. And I think the first step is just understanding that if that is the way that the relationship is perceived with adjuncts, then it's real. And there's something that we have to work towards that. I think the second component would really be asking adjuncts how they want to be involved and felt cared about on campus. I think when we look at the way that we approach contracts and things like that, we build in professional development, we build in other aspects that work towards office hours and more of the pedantic type solutions for adjuncts, but very rarely do we ask adjuncts, what would you like to see in order to feel cared about? So that my answer is I don't know yet, but I'm certainly open to listening.
Great. Thank you. Those were all of the questions that we had in the chat, and we are actually at our time for Q&A. Thank you, Dr. Corner, again.
Thank you.
And any last words before we move on to our next item?
I just want to thank 3CSN for putting this on. This is truly the area where we grow our capacity as a system across the state. And every single person who's on this call has already shown a tremendous commitment to caring for students. And I'm very excited to see the types of cultural change you have on your campus and what we can learn from your efforts.